What's up, guys? This is Bullfire the Fell-Handed, and this is the weak spot guide to the IS-7, a very difficult tank to deal with if you do not know where its weaknesses lie. We are going to go over this today. I will teach you how to defeat this monster. Frontal weak spots. Now, the tank is not easy to penetrate. You're never guaranteed a penetration against this tank. It's guarded by compound angles and trickery. I urge you to keep a steady hand when scoping any of the following locations. First, what I'm going to do, guys, is explain the thickness of the armor, followed by the angle of the plate, and then finally the effective compound angled armor. Let's begin with the lower glacis. It has 150mm of thickness, and it's sloped at 50 degrees. This gives us an effective armor thickness of about 233mm. All of the angular plates on the front of this tank are 150mm thick, just to keep it simple. This is relatively thin armor for a tier 10 tank, so this tank will be vulnerable to artillery as well as HESH rounds. That being said, the compound angles of the armor make this tricky. Now, continuing with the lower part of the pike nose, we start with the standard 150mm thick plate, and it's tilted at a 57-degree angle. Now, to make all this math easier, a 60-degree angle doubles the effective armor, just to give you an idea of some of the numbers here. Now then, that armor piece is tilted 55 degrees more, giving you an effective armor of approximately 480mm, all out of a 150mm piece of armor. The angled armor above that is easier to penetrate, if only slightly. I'm talking about, guys, where the headlights are. Now, once again, we start at 150mm this time, but the armor sloped at a 59-degree angle and then angled again at 45 degrees, coming to a grand total of about 412mm of effective armor. If this tank is facing you and there is no possible shot at the lower plate, I would not recommend firing at all. The upper glacis, guys, is extremely tough, and unless you are firing a very, very hot round, you will most likely fail to penetrate it. Given heat shell tendencies to bounce off angled armor, I would not waste one of those either. You can't do it consistently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The driver's hatch in the dead center of the hull is extremely strong as well. I'm not going to put a number on it, but if you hit it, penetrate it, and do damage and not just, destroy the module, you may want to buy a lottery ticket. Moving on, let's talk about the turret for a minute here. This is the really tough part of this tank, the turret. If you thought the hull was bad, you are in for a shock, because the turret is considerably worse. The mantlet on many tanks is extremely strong, but it can be pinned. This mantlet is immune. Can you damage the gun with high X? Of course. Other than that, find a new location to shoot. The weakest areas of the turret are to the left and right of the gun, weighing in at an effective 300mm of effective armor. I won't bother you with the angles of the turret because it's sloped and they will change considerably depending on which areas you are looking at. Aside from the quote weak spots unquote on both sides of the gun, the rest of the turret runs an effective 480 to 490 depending on where you hit, assuming you strike it dead on from the front, of course. If your aim is off, you can assume an auto bounce. There is a weak spot underneath the gun, but the IS-7 driver has to lift the gun up in order for you to hit it. As you can see here, I cannot connect with it unless he raises his gun up. Okay guys, now this is dealing with the IS-7 angled. Now, I'm not saying if you're driving the tank you should angle it. I'm just saying when you're attacking these things, sometimes you're going to catch them angled, and this is going to be where to shoot. Now, if the tank is angled exactly at 45 degrees, this is for numbers' sake, mind you, your best bet would be aim behind the headlights. The effective armor there would be in the mid 260s. The side of the pike nose facing me is in the mid 270 range. The lower glacis it can be pinned from this angle. It is tricky. I would not shoot at the sides due to the fact, you know, you've got quite a bit of spaced armor. The top is angled, things of that nature. It's extremely tricky. I happen to be pinning him now, but honestly, it's more along the lines of touch and go. You might pin, you might not. Although the IS-7 has received a nerf, some update in the past, so it may help facilitate what you're trying to do here. Now, as you can see, guys, I'm alternating running heat rounds as well as APCR, and this is coming from a tier 10 medium, so just take all of that in mind. If you're running a slower velocity shell out of a heavy tank, it may have slightly different properties, because the medium tanks are very punchy as far as guns go. Moving on, let's go to the side weak spots, guys. Now, the flat side of the IS-7 was originally intended for storage. You see, it's not actually flat on the side. The real side of the tank is a reverse 45-degree slope, hidden by a 20mm thick swinging compartment which acts as spaced armor. The effective armor on the flat side of the IS-7 is 250 to 260 millimeters of thickness. Effective. You have to be perfectly perpendicular in order to penetrate this. That being said, the angled armor directly above this is considerably easier to pin, depending on your angle, of course, because it's essentially the same thing without the spaced armor. This section of the tank comes in at 220 millimeters of effective thickness. A fairly easy penetration. A sure bet would be firing between the flat spaced armor and the top of the tracks. My personal favorite spot. This is the literal side of the tank. There, the armor is a mere 100 millimeters thick with no angle whatsoever. You're going to see me fire at this momentarily. Shoot this location, but keep your scope steady because a rush shot may hit the spaced armor above that. The massively thick turret extends the sides in very odd ways. A sure bet would be not firing anywhere on the turret forward of the emblem, because I have had some really crazy bounces in the past firing on IS-7s from the side. So just be aware of that, guys. Anything can happen. Favorite spot, bam, right there. Moving on. This is the rear weak spot. Now, you know, I know everybody says, well, it's the rear, you know, what do you do? Well, here's the thing. If you're firing on the rear of this tank, don't auto lock, okay? The areas I'm firing on right now are tricky. They are compound angles on the side, and they have an effective 290 millimeters of penetration. Now, of course, can you pin them depending on where you hit those particular plates? Yes. The upper angled plate at the direct back of the tank is an effective 115 millimeters. That's an easy pin as well. The lower plate is an effective 100 millimeters. Now, be cautious hitting the turret. If you aim too high, if your round disperses, what's going to happen is you are going to hit it just like that, and it's going to bounce. Not that I'm saying aim there, but I'm saying if your round disperses there, it's going to hit and it's going to bounce. So just be very cautious. I would not auto lock this tank per se. because you're never guaranteed a penetration against this tank. Guys, I hope you enjoyed my IS-7 weak spot video. Please remember to subscribe.